There you go. We are recording right now, and I am so grateful, Rachel, that you are here with me today. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here and to see your sweet face.
Yes, yes. Likewise, I feel like we were talking before the interview. I feel like we haven't seen each other in person for a long time. I would have
Mm.
tell a little bit to the listeners a little bit about you and how you and I got to meet because you are one of my yoga teachers and we met through the yoga medicine teacher training with Tiffany Cruikshank at Samahita retreat. And oh my
Hmm.
gosh, was that teacher training amazing?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to be heading back to Thailand for the first time since that training
Wow.
in a few months. So I've been all the memories have been kind of coming back to me of that training and that trip and the people, and yeah, it's been quite fresh in my mind lately.
Yeah, it was very special. But yeah, it was like that was, if I'm not wrong, the year must have been around 2017, maybe
Yep, exactly.
2017.
2017.
We haven't seen each other ever since, but we were mentioning how, connecting with social media is still like something good.
It doesn't feel like anywhere near that long, does it? Because I see you most days
Yes.
chatting away on my Instagram feed.
Exactly. Exactly. All of these algorithms at the end of the day, they have something good. And, talking about algorithms and content, I wanted to bring you to the podcast, Rachel, because I really love the way you share your message. I really love the way you share your content. And I would like to talk a little bit about this with you, in particular with blogging, because I know you also have a lot of experience blogging for yourself. I mean, for your channels, but also for other publications. Before we dive in, though, if you can let us know, as I say, I might have said something at the beginning of this interview, but if you want to let us know, who you are, what's the work that you do, and what the listeners should know about you.
Well, I'm Rachel. I teach yoga full time and I'm based in Queenstown in New Zealand, which is a little resort town at the bottom of the South Island. And today, beautiful crystal clear skies and fresh snow. So I'm in my happy place today. And I say I teach yoga full time. I only now teach 3 in-person weekly classes, and I have about 3 remaining one-to-one clients. And all of the rest of the time, I'm now working on teaching online or writing or conducting podcast interviews or doing teacher trainings. So I've had an interesting shift in my mix of teaching from being primarily group classes to a really busy schedule of group classes and one-to-one sessions to now a really fun mix between content creation and teaching yoga. What
Mhm.
else should you know about me? The people that I do teach in person are mostly in their 60s and 70s, active, healthy, older people who are drawn to the same things in my resort town that I am, the mountains.
Amazing. And that's very interesting, Rachel. Do you think that shift, you're talking about that shift, how you used to work a little bit more in person? Still, I know you before 2020, because I know 2020 was a big shift. And I
Mhm.
know that you still do some things online and you share content online, but do you think that shift about becoming more of a content creator, maybe that this doesn't sound right, but becoming more of a person who is sharing more things on online, do you think that shift had to do with 2020 and all the changes we had?
It had definitely started beforehand, but 2020 accelerated it for sure. I was only teaching a really limited amount of yoga online. I was writing articles beforehand, but I wasn't doing online classes until 2020. So
Mhm.
that was what really made the shift from somebody who teaches in person full time and does a bit of writing and does a bit of teacher training to somebody who now most of my time is online, and the minority of it now is actually spent with people face to face and in person.
Wow, I can totally relate to that because also before 2020, my focus was actually teaching yoga, movement, fitness. Those were the things I was most passionate about, and this is what my retreats were about. And my clients, the people that I work with, mostly one-on-one, they were also learning yoga, fitness. And since 2020 also, I shifted, like now my work is mostly online. I have also shifted my, the people I'm talking to, because right now I'm talking mostly to yoga teachers, wellness professionals. But yeah, it was a huge shift. Now my work is like a step for when I have like some in-person event or some retreat, it's mostly online as well. So I really feel you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it gets a bad rap. A lot of people have not enjoyed the shift as much, but I am a real introvert. And as much as I love people, it takes a lot of energy for me to be with people in person. And so I always needed to spend a lot of time afterwards recharging my batteries. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not a natural person at running retreats the way you are, because I'd never get that chance to top back up. I'd be with people again, giving out as much as I could. And by the time I got home, the tank was empty. So for me, this mixture suits my personality a lot more. I feel like I have a lot more energy and I don't have to spend as much time cocooning to rebuild my energy reserves.
Yeah. Well, my experience in person with you was amazing, and I think you really, really, you and of course the whole yoga medicine team really made a great job for us to feel like we were, whole and embraced, and we were guided all along the way. But I really feel you, Rachel. I also may look like a very extrovert person, but I actually also love, being on my own, and I thrive sometimes, like, even like hours working on my projects, and just like being by myself. What I really enjoy about online, and I understand that online is not for everyone, but for me, what it really stands out is the freedom, because as you know, having my husband here in Bangkok, being from Spain, I tend to travel back and forward. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to have that freedom to be able to be not attached to a single location, if that makes sense.
I agree.
All right, so let's dive in, because we are here today to talk about the content. And as I say, one of the things I really love about you, it's the way you share content. Everything looks like super organized and clean and very valuable. Like the main thing I would say, your content it goes very good to the point, and I think people appreciate that in general. So my first question for you, Rachel, would be, how do you get to generate content ideas? And I'm talking about written, social media.
Question, because if you're the kind of person who is just, sitting at home in front of your computer going, oh, what am I going to write about next? Or what am I going to post about? You're never going to get great, juicy ideas from that forced situation. They really need to come bubbling up organically. And so there's a part of my brain that is always on listening for repeated themes or little threads that I can pull on. So I'll get ideas from questions that students ask in class, or when I teach something and I see it misinterpreted, that might generate an idea of a common misunderstanding that people have. Maybe I'm listening to content from another movement discipline and wondering in my own head, how does that apply on the yoga mat? What's our take on that? That might generate an idea, or in my own practice on the mat, or in my own body, not practicing enough on the mat, that might also generate ideas. And so they've got to, in my mind, kind of bubble up naturally or organically in order to be interesting to other people. And so key for me is to capture those ideas whenever they come up, because it's rarely when I'm sitting in front of a computer or a blank piece of paper. It's I'm out walking the dog, or I'm in a class, or I'm in the shower, or, something unrelated will just pop into my mind. Capture it then while it's fresh. And if it comes with, the 3 points or a couple of ideas, capture that stuff too while it's fresh in your mind, so that then when you do need to create a post or create a blog or write an article or whatever, you've got a nice, rich list of ideas to draw from.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think it's a great way to keep the things in a way systematized. I also have those kind of ideas, because exactly this is when the ideas come usually from, when you are like doing something that is not work.
Hmm.
I tend to send an email to myself, I tend to
Yes.
have an idea, think about that word, and I was like, okay, I'm going to send the email. And then, yeah, that
Yeah,
really,
I have
really
notes in
helps.
my phone, so very, very similar. My dog is very used to be stopping and jotting a quick note in my phone while he's mid sniff. So, yeah, that's the key, I think. Capture those ideas when they bubble up. And I think the trouble is that people often confuse or conflate idea generation and idea execution. The
Mhm.
generation phase for me is really precious. It's really magical. You can't schedule it. So you've got to be ready to have a system, whether it's an email or a note or something to capture that idea when it comes up. And then there's a whole separate, much more boring process of actually sitting down and executing on that idea, writing the thing or filming the thing that is something that you can schedule and something that you can do in front of your computer without fresh inspiration because the inspiration has already come.
Okay, so okay, we are here making the difference between the idea that comes. We were talking like you are taking a hike with your dog, which by the way, I love seeing your hikes on Instagram.
I
And
love
those,
doing my hikes, Instagram or not. I love doing my hikes. It's a pretty
yes,
beautiful place to live.
beautiful. New Zealand, I always love seeing, like you are like on the top of the mountain, and so there is you have that moment in which you get that idea that it might comes from the work that you're doing or something that you mentioned that I also think it's super key here is like you also listen to what your students are telling you, what are the common
Hmm.
problems they are having, and then you are like, boom, I have the idea. Okay, I write it on my
Yes.
list, and
Yes.
then that would be the idea generation. Now you
Yes.
say that there is another part, which is the idea execution. Would
Yeah.
you mind taking us a little bit on how this process works for you?
Yeah, absolutely. This for me is it's like the opposite end of the spectrum. If the idea just kind of bubbles up from nowhere and feels really easy and just kind of comes to you and all you need to do is capture it and write it down, the execution phase is much more front brain executive function, organize, systematize. So I don't tend to even attempt that process unless I have a good chunk of uninterrupted time. And for me, an hour or 90 minutes of uninterrupted time in my schedule is when I would do the actual writing or the actual filming of a video. So
Ooh.
I'm uninterrupted. I've done all of the things that I have to do for my schedule that morning. I've now got time to sit down. I can pull up my list of ideas, pick which one I'm going to explore, and then I'll start to create a sort of skeleton structure. And I think when we are new to content creation, or at least speaking from my own experience, my tendency was I'm going to tell you everything I know about, say it's the core. I'm going to tell you everything I know about the core. And I have found that I have a lot more traction, a lot more success, a lot more engagement with people if I just pick one thing, like one little interesting aspect that you haven't considered, or the three things that you should know about your core, or common misconceptions that you might have about the core. So rather than just spouting the whole list of what is it, where is it, what's its function, how do you work with it, to take a much smaller chunk of that idea and create something that is hopefully a little bit less encyclopedic and a little bit more like telling a story. So
Mhm.
the kind of common things that I'm looking for there, and my teacher Tiffany Cruikshank always speaks in a really beautiful way about finding the right sort of topics for you to talk about between a Venn diagram where the overlaps are what you know about, what your expertise is in, what you're good at, clear at delivering, and what your people, your students want to hear from you. And if you can get something into the middle,
Mhm.
something that you know about, something that you care about or are good about explaining, and something that people want to hear, that's going to be well, at least it will have a much better chance of being a really great idea, an engaging idea. And then you're looking for some interesting little hook or aspect. So, like I said, I will sometimes explore a common misunderstanding or a common question. Like I wrote an article on should you squeeze your glutes in back bends? Because this is something that people debate. A common misconception might be there's a reason why you can't balance in handstand and it might not be your core, or a really nice simple framework like three things to do for thoracic mobility. So instead of just listing off every single thing you know about that topic, try to find a little hook, a little in, some little nugget that will make it more engaging, more interesting. And if people want to know more, the good news is you can write another aspect of that topic later, or you can do another video or reel on that topic later. So pick a sweet little nugget and explore that. And then the boring part is giving it a framework, making it logical. Anything that I write, I will then read out loud to see, does it sound like it's coming from me? Does it make sense? Is it kind of conversational? Are there typos that I didn't see while I was typing, but that I do see when I go to read it? So yeah, that's the kind of boring, systematic part of taking your idea, giving it shape and form, and then putting words or video around that shape and form.
Well, yeah, it's boring. It's boring, but I think it pays off in the end.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yes, it pays off because I think people can really connect. I love how you say how you like to find the balance between what you are good at, essentially what you are good at, what you're passionate about, and what people are also looking for. Because I think this is this is really, really good idea to reflect about when you're planning to write something. And of course, I really, this is something that I need to apply for myself sometimes, is the other thing that you're talking about, which is the trying to make a simple thing that is digestible for people, because sometimes we have this, I think this is common with yoga teachers, we want to give away everything, we want to give away so much, but then it may feel a little bit overwhelming for people. Would you think so as well? Hello, my friend. Sawadee Krap from the land of smiles. This is one of my favorite countries in the world. It's like my second home. This is Thailand. And I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to spend some time together with me in my upcoming business bootcamp in Koh Samui, in an island, beautiful tropical island in the south of Thailand, in a wonderful place which is my spiritual cove called Samahita Retreat. This business bootcamp will happen in April 2025. So if you are watching this video before 2025, you're still in time to sign up. We're gonna be talking about how to build and how to grow a heart-centered business. And we're gonna do this together with a community of heart-centered entrepreneurs in a wonderful place. Honestly, Samahita Koh Samui, it's a place close to my heart, and I can tell you it's one of the most transformative and beautiful places in the world. So if you have been gaining some value from my content and you would like to have an in-person, unforgettable experience with me and a group of like-minded people, check out the links in the description of this video. Check out for Zenpreneur Biz Bootcamp, or just DM me in some of my social media and I will connect with you and give you the link for signing up. This is going to be epic. You don't want to miss it. And I really hope to see you there. Okay, my friend, that's all for today. Khop kun krap.
I mean, I still do it sometimes. I can't help myself. I'll still do a everything you need to know about your rotator cuff post, or everything you should know about Glute Max. I still do those, and I consider them as a kind of referral resource for teachers to go back to, but they definitely aren't the things that people get excited about. They're not the posts that people comment on. They're not the articles that people share. So if I'm really looking for something to generate some engagement with the people I'm talking to, picking one little nugget of an idea that might be just a slight twist, something surprising or something misunderstood or something underestimated, something hidden, all of those words already, you can feel your interest getting a little bit piqued. Like, what's the thing that people misunderstand about the SOAS? That could be a fun post.
That's really good. And I also understand I also see how we in general tend to interact in a different way from social media. Like on Instagram, like if you get to do like a very in-depth post, like no one is going to read usually, because we tend to behave in a different way on Instagram, which is like kind of
it's tragic.
Fun. It's tragic.
I remember I did like a 15-second reel at some point, and somebody commented, "Oh, I really appreciate the in-depth approach." And I was like, in depth, it's 15 seconds long. That's the opposite of in depth. But as far as, I guess, compared to TikTok, 15 seconds is a long period of time. And yeah, our engagement is different, as opposed to getting a newsletter from somebody with a blog on it where you might be content to read for a few minutes. You're right. On social media, you don't have more than maybe 15 seconds.
Yeah.
As sad as that sounds.
I think social media might be good for that hook you're talking about. You're talking about how to hook people, right? Because then you spark their interest, and then maybe you can take them to read, if they're interested, to read a more in-depth article, but away from Instagram where you are constantly distracted with things, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. On Instagram, I'll tend to say, what's the surprising thing you need to know? And then read more in the caption.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are like, what is the surprising thing? Or what is the common misunderstanding? Will read the caption. But I still often title articles, or at least focus articles around the same thing. I think I've done one that was like 35 poses you didn't know were core work. Now, that's a lot longer than I could put in a social media post, but the hook is the same. There's something surprising or unexpected, or there are things that I won't think of as core work. So I'll be willing to dive down into the content and read a bit further. So yeah, looking for something to gauge people's interest, some small aspect of the topic. And the nice thing about that is it might bring up questions from people that you can then use as fuel for your next post or your next blog, or it might leave you 5 other things on that topic that you're keen to talk about that you didn't get to in this article or this blog or this post. So it sort of feeds its own next idea generation, which is something I really appreciate, because I never want to be the person going, ugh, what am I going to post this month? I can't think of anything interesting to say. So I really like the fact that I always have unexplored ideas, and I just need to schedule some time, an hour or 90 minutes, to sit down, flesh it out, give it some structure, and then put some words or some video together.
That's amazing, and I know our listeners, they're gonna get a lot of inspiration in that. Talking about a structure, how does this work for you? Do you have a calendar? Do you organize yourself, like having a kind of calendar to know what you're gonna be writing every month, or is there that you don't have that?
I probably should. I did an interview on the Yoga Medicine podcast with Dana Diamant, who's another teacher who was there on your teacher training. And she has a beautiful system of content generation where she sort of has a monthly rhythm of something informational or instructional, something inspiring, and then some practice like myofascial release or a stretch that you can do. And I think if you're newer to it, or you're somebody to whom structure really appeals, I think that's a great way of doing it. And just to find a rhythm that feels sustainable for you. It might just be 3 posts a month, or 3 areas of content that you produce a month. Something that feels sustainable and gives you some structure might be really helpful. But for me personally, not to feel conflicted in my relationship with social media, I don't like to have any schedule at all. I don't like to have a sort of calendar going of when I'm going to post or what I'm going to post, or feel any pressure for the topics to accumulate along a similar theme. I just kind of post what comes up when I feel like it. And that's the sort of deal that I've made with the devil of social media, so that I'm happy to post. I don't feel any pressure to post. And I've got enough of a back catalog of things on Instagram that, if people stumble across me, they've got plenty of things to look at. I don't need to feed that daily, thank goodness. Although I do post in stories every day. So I guess that is something else that keeps my connection with social media, even though I don't feel like I have to generate meaty content every day.
Yeah, but in a way, I think what you just say, Rachel, I think is very strategic in a very smart way. Because if someone finds you, let's say they know about you, they look for you on the internet, on Google, on Instagram, they already gonna have a lot of content that you have been creating over time. And it doesn't mean that you need to keep posting every day, because sometimes we feel this pressure is like, like the marketing gurus, they are telling us you should post every day. And
yes,
it's like
I've done those courses too.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think if you want to be an influencer, like if this is where you want to make your mark, you probably do have to put a lot more energy into it. But for me, social media is not that's not where I work. I teach yoga away from social media, and social media is kind of like my online resume. It's a chance for people to get to know a little bit more about me, but that's not where I plan to make my living. So I think it's helpful to have that in your mind of, do I want to be a yoga influencer? In which case, I'm probably going to have to put a lot more work and time and consistency into posting and find a rhythm to my posting. But I don't need it to serve that function for me. And so if I post a couple of times a month, 3 times a month, that's plenty, because people who want to know more have got lots of content to look back on. And that's something else that I think is really helpful to remember, is that when you do have a back catalog of posts on social media or blogs, you can revisit them, you can recycle them, you can remix your old reels or just share them again unedited. You can have a look at your old blogs, notice if your thoughts have changed on this topic or whether that sparks a new question or a new revelation, and go from there. So don't feel like once it's out, once it's done forever. You can really revisit that, especially since somebody may have given it 15 seconds 3 years ago. You could probably repeat that same thing again.
Yes, yes. That makes so much sense, Rachel, especially, what you say at the beginning about depending on what your goals are. Because obviously, yeah, if you want to be a yoga influencer, as you say, of course, you need to fit the algorithm, you need to be there. It's different than maybe you do teach classes online or you do retreats or something, and then what you want to have is like a little window for people to have a feeling of what you have. And I think this is exactly what you meant, how it works for you. Yeah.
Yes, I love that description of having a little window so people can look at your website or your blog posts or your social media and have a little glimpse of what you're like as a person and what you're into and what topics matter to you and what kind of feeling you generate in the content that you post. I tend to have a little tongue in cheek in mind. This is what I love about reels compared to the old static photograph, is I get to make some faces and do a little bit of ham acting and show a little bit more personality and still provide, hopefully, really good information in the captions. But you get more of a sense of my personality than you used to back in the old days of a static photograph and an inspiring quote, which is, I think, where many of us started on Instagram back in the day.
Yes, yes. Everything is like it's changing with the trends and everything. And but I also love, Rachel, what you say about repurposing, because I think sometimes there
Yes.
is a little bit of fear around that. And I have experienced myself, like especially the posts that are more liked by people, just like kind of changing the image or changing or making a reel and using like kind of the same words, but maybe change a little bit around. And people resonate still, you know?
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
overestimate enough how once you've gone to all the trouble of creating something, you want to get as much use out of that as you
Yeah.
possibly can. So if it's an article that for me might be, 800 or 1,000 words, I'm going to use that as a post on social media. I'm going to create a video inspired by that and post it as a reel. I'm going to use that as the focal point for my newsletter that I send out to people. So I'm trying to get as much benefit out of the time I invested in that content as I possibly can. And even once I've created a reel, as you said, I can put a new cover on it. I can use a snippet of it. I can repurpose it. Don't ever be afraid to reuse the content that you've already created, because you want to maximize the the return that you get on that invested time. And we think people will be resistant to it, but people don't spend anywhere near as much time noticing what we do as we think they do. So they're not going to be looking at your Instagram feed thinking, wait, I saw that post 9 months ago. Is she just No, they don't know, they don't care. If they do know, they don't mind. It's something they may have forgotten,
Yeah.
since that 9 months ago when you shared it. So yeah, don't hesitate to reuse content.
Absolutely. And I think we need repetition for learning as well. It's like when you
Of
learn
course.
a sequence, when you learn sun salutation or whatever, you need to repeat and repeat and repeat. And it's part of the learning process, I think. So people
Yes.
sometimes are also looking for that reminder all the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
100%. And you might also find that when you circle back to something after a little while, maybe you have a slightly fresh take on it, or maybe something that you felt really strongly about last time you've revisited. I mean, that could be an even more engaging topic to be something I've changed my mind about, or something I've learned since putting this content out last time. So there's always, always, always ways to use that to spark fresh ideas, or just to repeat the same idea if it still feels really relevant to you and your students.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, random question.
Hmm.
Chat GPT, yes or no?
No, I haven't touched ChatGPT yet. And it's because as a child, I grew up reading a lot of science fiction. And so deep in my soul, I know
Mm,
that AI will take over the planet at some
mm,
point, at some
mhm,
time.
mhm,
Only partially kidding. And so I'm being very, very careful in my initial interactions with AI,
mhm,
because I want to make sure that when I do interact, I know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
That is
Yeah.
partially just childhood trauma coming up here, of worrying about the machines taking over the world. But no, I don't use Chat GPT. I know a lot of people who do. I
Mhm.
don't. I
Yeah.
I I I don't want to use it until I know exactly what's going on behind the curtain there.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Yes,
And
it's
also, I love to write. It's one of the core parts of my job. But if
right.
writing is not a core part of your job and it's a real barrier to you getting content out, maybe it's worth you using a little bit of AI help to give you that nudge to get the content
Mhm.
out there to people.
Yeah,
But not for
I do
me.
use ChatGPT, but obviously I would never use it to write a whole blog for me because that wouldn't sound like me. You know, all the process you mentioned before about reading out loud and
Hmm.
rereading and understand if these are things that you would write yourself. You know, I think you need to go through that process because as I tried ChatGPT. For me, it's very helpful right now to correct typos because
Hmm.
English, I primarily write in English, but English is not my first language. So sometimes I really need that kind of, proofreading. And this is a
Hmm.
way that I use it. Sometimes I may use it like take a post that I have already and I ask ChatGPT to make a little bit of, to transform into social media posts. And that can gives me
Hmm.
idea. But even though I am pro of using it in that way, but I'm always gonna come back to what you said before, which is like kind of rereading out loud and also try to understand if these are words that you're using. And the
Yeah.
reason is because when I started to use ChatGPT, sometimes I just play and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I would just like kind of not copy paste the whole thing, but almost. And then I
Hmm.
realized how actually it didn't sound like me at all. And I experimented with a
Yeah.
couple of social media posts. And I felt like even though the post had a lot of value and there were things that I've talked before and people kind of reacted in a good way, they basically ignore me. And that was at the beginning, of ChatGPT when it came out and not many people knew. Like right now, everyone knows if you read a post on social media and it has been written by ChatGPT, everyone knows now, how it sounds. But yeah, I find it's an interesting tool. I was also I felt also very reluctant at the beginning. I was like, oh my God, same as you, like what's
Machines
gonna
are going to take over the
happen?
world.
Yeah.
I
But
do
I
think
think,
I'm
go ahead.
partially tongue in cheek, but obviously this will be a tool moving forwards, and eventually I will use it. I just want to wait until I have a better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes, and I'm hoping they put in better guardrails around accuracy because that at the moment I think is the big issue with, say, the kind of posts that I write that have quite a bit of anatomical information in them. I want to make sure that the information I'm putting out is accurate and that they're not, pulling up quotations of studies that don't exist or making assertions that sound great but aren't accurate. But I think you're right. In the future, this will just be a tool that we're all so used to using that it becomes an intrinsic part of writing. But for me, not just yet.
We love your writing, so yes, and because you love writing and spending that time, maybe maybe it's not the thing for you right now because you don't need
I
it.
mean, I say that I do want to highlight for people that there is the fun side of content creation, which is for me when the idea comes and the initial sort of sketch of the framework of what I'm going to talk about or how I'm going to say it. I might have some sentences or some phrases pop into my mind, but then the actual sitting down and, especially if it's a yoga pose or sequence and I've got to do all these step your right foot forward, pivot, your back left heel to the mat, squeeze your feet towards each other. That's not so much fun. That can be a little bit sort of mechanistic and boring. So I don't want to imply that all content creation is fun. There usually is a point where I have to sit down with a cup of coffee and just make myself finish. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in the next 30 minutes and then I'm done. So it's not always fun, but overall, it's a process that I really enjoy of coming up with an idea and then transforming that into words, ideally, but video as a sort of as a way that tends to get more people's eyes on it than the words.
That's amazing, Rachel. And I don't know if you like to go through the takeaways of today's conversation.
Yeah, sure.
The things that you would recommend perhaps yoga teachers who are listening right now and they're like, okay, I want to start like kind of creating a little bit more of content. I want to be a little bit known, by people around or be found on the Instagram. what would be those takeaways based on this interview that you would
Yeah,
share?
the first one that I think is really important is to have your content ideas come up organically, whether that's in your own practice, in your daily life, in conversation with students, questions from students, misunderstandings from students. Whenever that thing comes up, just have a method where you capture the idea for use later, because the things that people are going to be most interested in are the things that they're thinking about when they're in their own practice, or that they're wishing they could ask their yoga teacher, or that they do ask their yoga teacher. So grab those ideas as they come up naturally, as opposed to trying to force them to come. And then understand that that process of idea generation and idea capture is probably going to be different from the execution phase, which will require, at least for me, a good block of uninterrupted time to sit down, to sketch out what you want to talk about, to give it a logical flow, and to figure out, is that going to be an article or a blog or a video or all of the above, and to find a way to spin it, to take one aspect of it that's going to be really interesting and engaging, a common misconception or misunderstanding, a commonly asked question, something surprising, something hidden, something you didn't know, something where there's conflict. I'm not a big person for conflict on social media, but gentle conflict, like, should I squeeze my glutes or not? Is it safe to transition from Warrior 3 to Half Moon? Things like that, that, people might have some opinions about. That might be an interesting little hook. And once you've found that area that you think will make the content more interesting and more engaging, and also give you a smaller subset of information to work with, so you don't write a whole encyclopedia, then you just got to sit down and get it done. Sit down with your cup of coffee or your matcha, or, whatever is your fuel of choice, and plug it out until it's finished. Once you've done it, reuse the hell out of it. Use it as much as you can. Make it an email, make it a social media post, make it a reel, use it on threads. See if you can just maximize the time invested in multiple ways, and not just now today, but for the next 6 months, 3 years, 5 years. Don't hesitate to revisit and reuse content.
This is amazing, Rachel. These tips are gold, and I think if you apply all of these, oh my gosh, I think that it's going to give you like a very, very structured and straightforward process that can really, really help you to, put yourself out there and also share in a different way. Where can people find you if listeners want to get to know more about you? They want to get to know more about your work. What is the easiest way to find you?
I'm pretty easy to find. So if you're on Instagram, I'm rachelland.yoga, Y-O-G-A. My website is the same, rachelland.yoga, Y-O-G-A. If you look for me on Yoga Journal, I've got a bunch of articles there. If you look for me on Yoga International, I have a bunch of older articles there. If you want to do classes with me, head to yogamedicine.com and the online class platform. I teach classes there every single month. And if you want to do teacher training, same, yogamedicine.com. And I'm pretty easy to find there, with online courses and in-person stuff again now too. So depending on what you're interested in, I should be fairly easy to find.
Amazing. And teacher trainings, highly recommended with Yoga Medicine.
I mean, it's such a privilege to be involved in people's teacher training, isn't it? Because it can be such a transformative and life-changing process. It's a lot of work for teacher and for student, but it's a real privilege to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It was awesome to spend some time with you, and thank you so much for all the wisdom that you shared today with us.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been lovely to have an excuse to catch up with you, Manu. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay,